Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather here today, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. My name is Sonia Sadi Gandhi, and I'm the founder of IABCA, and of course the director of Gandhi Creations. And it is a real privilege, actually, to be back at Deakin downtown. I was here a few weeks ago for an incredible session with the cultural exchange program for the Gift City students, which I think, was such an eye-opener for me as well, particularly as I came to Australia as an international student. So thank you once again to Deakin for the opportunity for this collaboration with IABCA, but most importantly for all that you do within the education sector in building bridges and those powerful people-to-people connections. Can I also acknowledge the presence of the immediate past High Commissioner of Australia to India, Honourable Barry O'Farrell, AO, and of course the former Premier of New South Wales. Barry, we remain deeply grateful for your leadership, your principled diplomacy, and the way you've championed the shared democratic values which lie at the heart of the Australia-India relationship. So thank you so much for being here. And to all our other partners who are here, I know Shubha is going to be here from the Centre for Australia-India Relations. Abhay is here from the Confederation of Indian Industries, HCL, and of course our incredible hosts, Deakin University. Today is very special. In fact, it's very meaningful because today marks India's Constitution Day, a celebration of democracy, diversity, and the values that bind 1.4 billion people. That this day reminds us of something Australia and India hold deeply in common: a belief in democratic institutions, inclusive societies, and the rule of law. And IABCA, we often say nothing is ever random, is it? It's always thoughtfully placed, strategically aligned, or as my team tells me, Sonia's planned this long before Sonia even knew she'd planned this. So it truly feels really fitting to be here on a day like this. And I remember talking to Sarah, Jackie, Tess, and the teams around picking the right day for this event. So I'm glad that we are here honoring nation building, because what we do through IABCA and what Deakin does so well with relationship building between Australia and India is testament to tonight. But being here at the university is always very special for me, because I came to Australia as an international student 26 years ago, to survive on a budget of $15 a week, as we all do. And of course, to find the cheapest place for photocopying, which doesn't really exist anymore. But hey, that's what I did for the first few years when I came here. But now to stand in a place of learning like Deakin and surrounded by alumni and graduates and these incredible growth stories that we continue to follow feels truly magical. So we celebrate our alumni tonight, and how fascinating. I had quite a few of you ask me, is IABCA's Deakin? It's actually an overlap. So a lot of the India-Australia Business and Community Alliance Award winners over the years are actually Deakin alumni. So this collaboration was a given. Two powerful communities that, when combined, form one of the strongest soft power networks in the bilateral space. And this is just the start. But we are here and honored to have with us two amazing speakers, and of course our host as well. Can I begin by acknowledging, firstly, Rabneet Power, an absolute powerhouse. I'm not sure if everyone of you knows her personally, but if you don't, please go and say hello. Rabneet's the Deakin's Vice President for Global Engagement and CEO for South Asia. And let's be honest, a real dynamic leader who has taken and approved the first international university in India at the Gift City campus. Rabneet, we are so proud of what you do, and we truly commend and value how you are so inclusive in your relationship building. So thank you so much. And we have a superstar speaker with us, Leighton Warwick, who is the Joint Managing Director of Warwick Fabrics. And Leighton, I can't believe this. You are a Deakin graduate from the 80s.
A very long time ago.
Yep, sure. And isn't that fascinating to be able to dig that history and find that information for you to be here? And of course, a very, very proud alumni at the recently successful IABCA India Immersion Week that we did in India. And it was a real privilege to share your company and insights over there. So that particular initiative led to this, I say, the fireside chat. We will dive tonight into cross-cultural leadership, innovation, and the reality of taking an Australian brand global, which you have done, Leighton, including into India, a market that is very vibrant, layered, and endlessly creative. So a bit of a warning to you, though, because you're on a fireside chat with Rivneet. And Rivneet asks the questions, but nothing is off the table with her. So if you said something in 1993, she will have it up there in her file and she'll be asking you that question. But since so many of us are in the room, alumni and leaders, I want to share something that's very close to my heart before I pass on the baton to start the fireside chat. IABCA in itself has grown into a year-round ecosystem. And these chats, forums, immersion weeks, community outreach is, of course, our national awards program really propel the Australia-India relationship. And I'm delighted to share, and this is a direct plug, that the 2026 IABCA Awards are now open. So please do enter and please do share with your networks. It's the only non-membership platform that currently exists between the two countries, and it's free. So please share your journeys, because what happens when you share your stories is it acts as a mentorship for others, but most importantly, it also helps you realize what you've done over the past few years. So I also urge I think I was telling Rina about re-entering, renominating. Think about that, because since the time you have won an IABCA award in 2016, a lot's changed. And that's the beauty, that's the reward for the work that we do, is following your growth story. So please do enter. Okay, on that note, because relationships are built through people, through conversations, through shared stories, like tonight in this room, we move on and pass on to welcome Leighton and Dravni for the fireside chat. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sonia. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And on behalf of Deakin University, I do thank you all for your presence. Like Sonia said, Deakin has been very closely working in the space of Australia-India partnership for almost 31 years now. And my journey is 31 years old with Deakin. So I really value this time of being in Deakin today with all of you, and welcome to Honourable Barry O'Farrell as well. Thank you for all that you have done, Barry, for the Australia-India relationship. And I think under your leadership, the whole Australia-India engagement, and especially, I think, during the COVID times as well, in those difficult times, has really, really done well. So thank you for all that you do. I can't thank Sonia enough for her enthusiasm, for her passion, for her love and engagement with India. We just concluded a very, very successful event in India earlier this year. And I'm always, in awe of how she really does more and more. So thank you to you and to Abhay for all the industry connections that you bring on board between our two amazing countries. And to each one of you, welcome again from Deakin University. And thank you for being here. Each one of you matters, and each one of you has contributed immensely to this beautiful relationship that we have together. Manpreet, thank you, Pale, that you have done over the years as well. And I've watched it grow from where to where. I think connecting the diaspora through, SPS has been a very, very important part of what you do. So thank you. To Deakin University, Sarah and her team, thank you for putting this together. I'm going to now deep dive into a conversation with our very special friend here, a friend of IABCA, a friend of Deakin, a friend of the Australia-India corridor. So, Leighton, tell us what was the origin of Warwick Fabrics?
Right. Firstly, Rhoda, just thanks for having me, and thanks to the team and Sonia for putting on the event. It's a pleasure to be here in the house of Deakin, being a Deakin graduate, and it's advanced a long way from when I was there in Warren Ponds in the early to mid-90s, that's for sure. But it's lovely to see these premises, and Thanks for having me. So it's great. But now Warwick Fabrics, the business was founded in 1966, and that was 6 years before I was born. And my father Tom was the founder of the business at that time, and he was a very good fabric salesman who worked in Sydney, selling vinyl products for a company called Dermite at the time. And Tom was incredibly entrepreneurial and had a lot of flair. And he came back to Melbourne at the time. He was originally a Melbourne boy, and he was looking for something to progress himself at the age of 24. At the time he was courting my mother Anthea at that time, and he realised pretty quickly that he had to earn some money. And he went out at the time and created the business to be an agent for the vinyl company out of Sydney at the time, being Dermite. So he started selling the vinyl products. So that was the starting point. He at that time brought other products into the mix as well, being hardware products. So the business really started on hardware products, being like swivel bases, etc., for chairs, vinyls, obviously, and also velvets in the 70s. The velvets were huge for Dad in those early stages. So really, it began at that point in the late 60s, early 70s. Yeah.
And then you started. Was it a choice that you made to come into the business, or did it just happen? Or
Not really. He's a very commanding figure, my father. And Barry might have known of him through the Liberal Party. He's a very strong Liberal, through his time, and was in politics as well. And he was in the 87 federal election as a candidate for Dunkley. So he's an incredibly commanding sort of figure. And at the time, I'd finished university at 93 at Deakin, and I worked.
you made the right choice.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I worked overseas for a time, working in foreign exchange and financial markets. So I was more of a sort of a financial sort of person at that time, and I was working for Westpac at the time here in Australia. After I came back, and I was starting to progress. And Dad was sort of saying to me, "Well, what are you thinking? What are you doing?" I said, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, Dad. He said, "I've actually done a project here that I'd like you to help you with." So he managed to sort of rein me in and bring me in. That was in 1999, and 26 years on here now, and still working with my brother. It's just the two of us now. Dad passed away in 2018, and Mum a couple of years ago as well. So it's just the two of us now running the business, and it's going well. Yeah.
And how do you feel if you just think about and reflect back to the 26 years of your journey? How do you feel about all of that?
It was pretty dry to start with. So I'd come from financial markets, where it's all happening in the dealing room. And there was a lot of buzz, and you're rapid fire and lots of banter. So coming into a commercial environment in the back blocks of Collingwood, and all of a sudden, reconciling accounts. So it was an incredibly dry start at that point. But what actually happened is, over the journey, you just accrue things and you start looking after areas. And generally, what happened with my role was I tended to get all the things that people didn't want to do. So these people having difficulty in a particular part of the business, they'd say, "Well, why don't we give that to Leighton and see if he can do something with it?" So I was very much more operational based in my role. And my brother, who is my older brother, he worked overseas for some time in Warwick, UK in the 90s, because Dad created a business in the late 80s in the UK, and my brother was working in that business. And Cam was very much more product based. So he came in at a similar time as me into the Australian business. Cam was more product and I was more operational. And it worked very well. It's been a very good relationship.
And have you played to your strengths, from that point onwards, in terms of who you are today, or has it sort of happened as you've gone by?
Yeah, well, it's tricky, because you've got two brothers and you're both men, and you get egos and you get different things, and you've just got to sort of find your way, because in business there's always grey area as to what area different parts of the business fit under, And so Cam and myself will cross over at different times in different parts of the business, and you've just got to be able to navigate your way through that, because you don't want to step on each other's toes either, because then that causes issue, So
And you've seen the best of the companies, split. So you have to make sure you work together.
Yeah.
You complement each other. You sort of bring your strengths together.
yeah, and then you get other. This is the difficulty with family business. Then you get things with the parents passing away, and you sort out family estates as well. Yeah. While you're trying to run the business, and you deal with the conflict of an estate coming in and causing issue in the business, all that sort of stuff. So there's lots of it's little tricky sort of periods that you've got to navigate through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And here you are today, a global brand. So tell us your journey of going global and what was the rationale behind it, and then we'll talk more about India.
There's two phases. So obviously, we were talking a little bit earlier about Warwick, UK. So Dad, being his entrepreneurial self at the time, he went out and in the 80s, and he opened up Warwick, UK, basically to be a print converter for the Australian business. So there was that business that was an initial stage, and also with the natural growth of the business, there were companies wanting to represent us in New Zealand. So we formed a partnership in New Zealand with Martin Irvine and his family, and that relationship's still in place today, which is
It's amazing.
a 50-50 joint venture there, and a very strong business its own right there in New Zealand. So that was phase one. And then my brother and I, coming into the business, we realised that the furniture manufacturing in Australia was contracting significantly. And we thought, well, what other areas do we need to look at? And Ken was fantastic because he saw it all happen in the UK before he came to Australia. And he was very strong on building the decorative side of the business, decorative drapery, because we were traditionally upholstery and hardware. So Ken came and he brought the sort of decorative drapery side in, contract commercial products, export.
Right.
So then we started to look at export markets. So a lot of those new divisions were born because of the contracting manufacturing market in Australia.
Yeah.
And we had to make a choice. It's either do you want to have a business that's growing or do you want to have a business that contracts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously you made the right choice.
Yeah.
I'm interested in understanding what were the biggest lessons you learned while you made all these decisions going international and looking at.
You sort of, it's not about learning lessons as much. It's more about sort of, it's almost like a form of fishing, or throwing the nets out to see what you catch. You tend to go into markets to see if something works or sticks, or you get traction in a certain market, and then all of a sudden, as that market grows, you go, okay, well, maybe we better put an office there. It can be quite organic the way it happens.
Are you saying that it sort of is organic and not sort of a strategy thought through, right?
For us, probably different for different businesses, but for our business, definitely organic, because we're an entrepreneurial business that's been born from an entrepreneur, and Dan very much was that way inclined. If he saw that a certain part of the business was going well, obviously you start directing more resources to that area.
Right.
So a similar thing for us with, if we're starting to look at export markets and we're developing relationships in different markets, and we find that one market's doing better for us, obviously you're going to start to change your focus and put your focus into that market. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. How did India happen? India, of course, as we all know, land of textiles, color, vibrancy, textures, and so forth. And then here is a wonderful, Australian company that does have some global footprint, but looking into India and then making this bold move to actually establish in India.
Yeah.
So how did India happen?
I find it quite entertaining, because whenever you say to people, oh, we've got an office in India, they go, oh, so you've got a sourcing office in India? And I go, well, no, actually, we actually sell in India. And they go, what do you mean? I see we sell Warwick fabrics in India.
I was actually, when I read about your story, that was one of the points that really was quite interesting. And, for someone from outside of India to set up a business in India, for India, in the area where India has expertise is quite unique. So.
Yeah, well, again, it was organic growth. We had a fellow, a director in our business at the moment, Mohit Agrawal. He came to us at the time. He had a relationship with us at that point because he was working for a customer of ours in Australia, and he was going back to India. And he said to us at the time, look, I know that you're selling in different markets. Would you be interested in selling into India? And we said, well, yeah, we would. So he really started off as it was almost like a little bit of a hobby, like a weekend job for him, something that he was doing. And again, it was just a very slow start, but it just gradually grew. And then he came to us, and at the time he said, well, I really think we should, look at an office in India. And at the time, Cam and I weren't really ready for that because we were building a little hub in China for storing product with DHL to distribute out to furniture manufacturers in China for imports coming back into Australia at the time. So we had a fair bit going on in that market, and we sort of stalled a little bit at that point in time. But then we went back and we revisited it. And we were growing the business through companies that were clearing goods into India for us and selling through those channels. Those customers were selling under their brand, but our product as distributors. And it was growing, and Mohit was, working as an agent on the ground representing the brand. And it was doing well, but then we had a blockage. We had a situation where all of a sudden we couldn't clear the goods through because the main customer we were dealing with was having financial difficulty, So at that point we had to make a decision. What do we want to do? Do we want to do it ourselves, or do we want to? And at that point I went to Austrade and spent some time with them and looked at different options. And then we went about setting up the entity.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think we cannot undermine the power of relationships and the power of partnerships, the power of people-to-people engagement, being at the right place at the right time and taking bold decisions. I think what is really important to the audience as well is, obviously in any business, there are challenges, right? You sort of walk through, you deal with them. Was there any point in your time of this 26 years that you've been operating that you felt that was it?
Yeah. Well, I reckon it was tough. We had, our business, but my father, Tom, had his brother, Max, involved in the business for many years. Max is a great operator, and Dad in the early stages, sold equity to Max in the business. And, my brother and I, there was a time where we had to come in and at that point and we had to buy out, the other family. And that was difficult because, we had to really leverage off the balance sheet for debt. It was a significant payment at that point in time for the business, and it put us under pressure. But Dad was very good because he allowed us to leverage off the balance sheet for the lending, and it was great that he allowed us to do that. But you be under pressure, and obviously, whenever you do something like that, obviously, then the economy drops off. Yes. Then you're under pressure with the banks. Then you got, So there's been times, where it's been, and you get, but Dad was incredibly positive sort of person, and he said, well, what are you going to do? He said, you're going to curl up in the corner like in a ball, or are you going to get cracking,
And get There we are.
Well, this is it,
Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
India story, right? You've got an office, you've got a business. What was the first reaction when you went to India?
I was just the colour and the not noise, just the vibrancy, just everything that was happening around me the whole time, and the traffic and the
noise.
And I think my first experience was in the taxi with Mohit, and we're driving to the hotel and whatever, and we're coming into the traffic lights, and the taxi hit a bike or hit someone that was on a bike.
Oh, it's all right.
I'm just like stunned. Everyone's going, oh, it's dirty. I'm done.
Don't worry about it.
And it's all the time, I'm just, and then I've learned, obviously you learn pretty soon to just sit there and just absorb it, let it happen, and it all just finds its way, Yeah.
I had a couple of colleagues from Deakin in, I think, 1996. They were visiting for the first time. And we thought we'll do a bit of a sort of tour around Delhi and so forth. And we went on the highway to Agra. They just couldn't believe it, that this could actually happen. There were cars coming in 96. We didn't have the double lane highways and so forth as we do now. And people were like sitting tight, and then you finally said to them, just close your eyes. That's the best way to deal with it, and you'll be fine.
And the cows.
And the cars.
The cows, I was like, I can't believe it. He said, well, they're sacred, you look after the cows.
But the best thing about all of this is that it works. There is a madness behind it, and it does work.
Yeah, exactly.
And tell me, India is dynamic, right? Like you said, India is vibrant. India is multi-layered. Did you have difficulty as a person from Australia in those days when you started your work there to really establish relationships, understand the law of the land, work through it? And did you get local support for that?
Yeah, look,
What was the experience with people there?
it was usually there was brand recognition, which helped. A lot of people in the industry knew the brand, and it's a good, strong international brand with the presence in the UK and in different markets, so people know of it, and that really helped because I think it's such a strong industry domestically in India with the brands that are there, and I think there's definitely a niche for brand products and brands like ours just sit that layer above. They might not be the big busty international brand like the Mulberries and the G&J Bakers that are really expensive and whatever, but a really good value option that offers a really a decorative look, international colour palette. It just sits that little bit above, in price point.
And is that a market that you think is growing in India, or?
Oh, definitely, because you've got a burgeoning middle class there.
400 million people.
Yeah, exactly, and that are aspirational. They want something different at home. They don't want someone walking into their honeys and thinking, well, they've got the same thing as
It's next door.
yeah, it's next door. They want to say, oh, this is actually an international product. It's it's Warwick fabrics, or it's so that'll help. I think that definitely helps. And it's a matter of just trying to find your channels to tap into that market and picking the right little bitty distributors in all the different centres that just hit the right mark. And we've been probably selective in that approach where we haven't tended to go broadly to the market. We've just made sure that we've got key little distributors in different sections, in different...
You've got your niche.
Yeah,
You've got to understand how that works.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Your first showroom came up in 2023, didn't it?
Yeah, this is the main showroom that we've got now in Delhi, which is a fantastic. Murray calls it an experience centre. It's a beautiful setup there. And before that, we had smaller footprints, but a little bit more like base office with a bit of product in there. And we just very progressively grew in Oakla, where we had a little office in Oakla, really fabbed in some sampling, and we just progressively took over basements to store fabric, So all the basements around the street that we were based in Oakla, we just and we just put some racks in and put fabric in. So for me, it was great because it felt like the old days of what I saw when I grew up as a kid.
Yeah.
I saw what Dad did
In a country like India, to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I think I sometimes wonder when people come in, from different parts of the world to do business in India. It's not always easy to understand India, right? India is complex. And we Indians love to go in circles, right? We would start at one point, but we keep changing, and we do come back to that same point. And the clarity of thought, I think sometimes, and this is my experience of the education sector as well. We've got policies from the Universities Grant Commission, for example, but they're not clear policies. And I remember, Barry, in your time, there was a meeting, if you remember, where you, me, my Vice Chancellor, we were sitting with the Minister, and he kept taking us in circles about how this will work. Did you experience that while you did your work in India, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, probably more recently with the BIS, coming through.
Yes.
And there's not a lot of clarity around that. And we've obviously had some clearance issues with goods going.
And the bureaucracy around it.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously it's been something that's been put in at the higher level, and it's just not filtering down to the lower level. And people actually really don't know what to do, And I went into the bureau a few weeks ago when I was in Delhi to come try and meet with someone there. And it was just, it was just very difficult. And so it just... look, you're going to have those challenges, and as I say,
I think patience is very important. Like,
you've just got to work through it. You just got to find a channel through. And I believe if you can find a provider or someone that sort of has some experience in that area, that's ideal. And you work with them, and you work hand in hand with them, so that you've got it. At least you're getting some direction from someone. If you try and work it out yourself from scratch, it's not easy. You really need to work with a provider.
Yep.
You know.
what would be your message to people in the room who may be thinking of doing something between the two countries, whether a business from Australia into India or India into Australia? What would be your advice to them?
I think it's a great thing. I think that there's a lovely cultural connection between the countries. I love working with. I personally really enjoy working with Indian people, and I love the relationships that I have there. I think there's a natural connection there for some reason, whether it's come from the colonial ties of the British Empire, or whether it's come from cricket or whatever it be. But I just think there's a lovely natural connection between Australian and Indian people, and when we're doing business there, you can see that they want to do business with us. You know, and
You've seen that grow over the years.
yeah, definitely, and they love the fact that they're dealing with an Australian business more so than a British business or a.
Yes, so Australia has that unique advantage, and I think that love. In fact, I would say that in my experience over the 30 years, we couldn't be at a better time of Australia-India relationship.
It's a really strong sort of I can't really explain it, but it's definitely there.
There's a strength there.
Yeah.
Right. Tell us about your time at Deakin. You studied a BCom at Deakin in 1993, right? That's when you finished. I actually started working for Deakin in 1994. So there you
go.
We had a 32-year-old relationship with this university. So tell us about your time here.
Yeah, well, it was great. If I think back again, Deb was instrumental because I think I had an offer to go to Monash at the time to do arts, and Dad being a businessman said, "You're not doing arts. You're doing a Bachelor of Commerce." And I said, "Okay, well, what do I do?" He said, "Well, I've heard the Deakin." So he did a bit of a ring around, and he said, "I heard the Deakin offer a really good degree." So we went down and we met with Craig McGowan.
Geelong, did you?
Yeah, we went to Geelong, went down to Ward Ponce, and we met with Craig McGowan at the time. Who was the head of admissions at that time.
Yes.
And he said, "Well, Mr. Warwick, I'm glad you've come because," he said, "your son, there is an opportunity for him to take this position." And he said, "Here's the sheet of paper. If he signs it now, he'll get the spot." Dad looked at me and said, "Sign it." So
And you took as you were told.
decided, yeah, and that's how it started. And I lived in a little apartment in Newtown. Very sort of simple beginnings. I caught the bus to university every day because I didn't have my driver's license at that stage. So when I started, I was still 17. And then it progressed from there. I got a car. I then moved in with some friends down in Barwon Heads, and we did a bit of surfing, played golf, and went to university. It was fantastic. So I had an absolute ball. It was a great university. It was progressive at that time because all the other universities at the time were very staid in their approach. But Deakin was incredibly progressive and really trying to bring people in,
And Jeff Wilson was the vice chancellor at that time.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
John Hay.
Yeah, there was a great guy there, David Lethbridge, who used to head up the strategic management side of the faculty, and he would bring business people in. So he'd bring people like that in and whatever to give talks, and it was very progressive, and it was a great education. And so I look back on the time very fondly. Yeah, very fondly.
I mean, I remember in 1994 when I started out, I think we had 2 Indian students at Deakin University, or not even that. 96 we had 2, 94 we had none. And I was handed this piece of paper which said Deakin University, and I actually said to myself, what is that? And where is that? And it's been the journey of sort of internationalization. And today we are a university of 60,000 students from 49 different countries. It has been a wonderful journey, of course.
Very good.
Um, if you were to change one thing about your time at Deakin, what would that be?
I would have taken my accounting units through. So it was used to get a time because there's a great fellow there, Chris Kelly, who was a real genius
Yes.
there, and he wanted me to take my accounting units through. And I just at the time whether I was a bit lazy or whatever it was, I don't know. But I was more economics based. That's why I went into financial markets. So I took all the economics management units and a bit of law, and I enjoyed that. But I ended up in the business being more accounting based, but never trained professionally as an accountant. Just was a practical accountant. So I look back on that and go, I wish I actually
Done that.
I wish I actually took the accounting units through and qualified myself properly. But that's just what happened.
Right. Fantastic.
Yeah,
And have you been to Geelong campus lately? Or?
I haven't, and I want to go down and
Would love to invite you, Sarah. You must take him to
Yeah.
Geelong campus and you must have a look. You'll probably be amazed to see what it looks like today from, sort of over the years. I mean, it's just amazing growth at that university. And a lot of that has been through, the whole Geelong town growth for Victoria has been because of Deakin and because of international students and a whole lot of activity that Deakin University does there. So
No,
I'd love to show you around.
it's a huge part of the community. And there's no doubt about that.
And the other thing is that there's a lot of strong research in textiles that goes on at Deakin and at Frontier Materials. So we'd love to also show you that a little bit and see whether we could do something, to support your business.
We've got a very strong design team here in Melbourne, so I'd like to bring, get a bit of cross-pollination done on. So I think we've been discussing that behind the scenes.
Fantastic.
That'd be good,
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to probably just ask you the question, what does the future look like, and what do you have, what would you like to see more of, and how can Deakin University and maybe colleagues here support your initiatives?
Yeah, we just want to look with any business. You need the business to grow. That's the key. So you've got to continually look at your new channels. You can't you pay respect to your old channels and always look after those parts of your customer base, but you've also got to be saying, okay, what's our next thing? Where are we heading now? And that's what we're doing, and that's what we're focusing on with India. We want to see that grow. We want to you hit these little junctions where we hit a little junction now with clearance, in India, and we're working through that. So you want to be able to break through those little junctions because, that then enables you to step to the next level. So any people that can help with that, those sort of things, that'd be great. So they're the main things, to be able to bust through the barriers, That's the key.
That's great. I think you always will have barriers. I mean, there's no business that does not have the barriers. It is the resilience that you deal with and how you grow with that. Any 3 words that come to your mind, like in terms of traits that you think have really helped you and that you would like to share with the audience here in terms of that kept you going?
Yeah, we're pretty as personalities and our business, we're pretty open and we're very
Transparency.
yeah, we're open. We're a family business. People know who we are. They know what we stand for. We're very honest in our approach, and we look after our customers and we look after our staff, and that's what we do. And and we're doing the same thing with the business in India, and that's playing through in that business. And we've got some real loyalty there with the staff, And so that's really what we're all about. We want to take people with us. We want to, on the journey of growing the business, we want to do it together.
Fantastic. Look, it's been wonderful talking to you, and thank you so much for your time for coming here. I might just open up for questions. And we do have about 5 minutes for any questions that people may want to ask. Yes, please. Just introduce yourself quickly, what you do.
I should be fine. Yeah, I've been close to it. Street. Good evening. My name is Nitin Sabi. It's great to be here. As I said, I think for one of the things for the businesses is always scaling the businesses, and business needs to grow. And as I said, there are different methods and channels and strategies in place. So one of the strategies generally the entrepreneurs look at is, bringing in new people in there with the tech skills, experience, or as you said, one of the example issue was a joint venture with another company, right?
Yeah.
So in that scenario, I think one of the things comes into entrepreneur or the founders of those brands per se is the entry and the exit strategy. What if it doesn't work, right? What if it work, or whether even if it worked, then what is the exit strategy in 10 years, 20 years? So have you gone through that sort of in your mindset or in your journey? And if you have, then what is the framework for your work? I'll be interested in that.
Yeah, you're always thinking. You're right. You're always thinking, what if this doesn't work? How do I do it? What do I do with it? Do I scale it back? Do I wind the company up, or what do I do? Fortunately, we haven't had a lot of experience in having to do that along the way, which is good. We tend to wait to see that there's a significant footprint in that market for us, and then we put the infrastructure in, or we set the entity up. So we know that there's scope for growth there and whatever, but we've never actually ever had to shut a business down. In terms of we've exited out of the relationship with Warwick UK because it was very difficult to run a business on the other side of the world, and we had a business partner that came in there. Originally it was 100% owned, and we had a business partner that came in from a joint venture that we had with the South African company, Soledra and Viney at the time. The very nice business in South Africa that does decorative products. And part of that partnership went to the UK to run the UK business, and he was a very strong operator. So he just gradually took over time, and that just created the exit strategy there for us, and we still hold a license agreement there, So it's just interesting in business. I don't want it to sound like we're not strategic, but just things evolve, like anything in life. Just things evolve, and opportunities present and opportunities close. And I guess when the opportunity presents you,
You take it on.
you've got to go, okay, I've got to step through that door and do that, and that's the key, So I hope that answers what your question. Yeah, right.
Right. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Tina. I'm here to represent Full Circle Social Enterprises, and I'm also a Deakin alumni. Very dear to my heart. I did a humanitarian degree here, but we come from a very different lens. So we're at Full Circle. We're developing a leadership program for underprivileged kids. And as we're weaving that through, I guess one of the things that I'm really conscious about is to hold my biases and my thoughts about how to do something, and allow that space to be filled by co-design and the voices of the Indian kids, really, that I'm here to serve, to allow them to tell me what their needs look like before I tell them what they should or shouldn't do. So my question for you is from a very different business model. Is there anything that you feel, and Ravneet mentioned earlier, India is on top of the design, and when it comes to fabrics, and it's really quite beautiful when you go there to see the range and the designs. What have you learnt from Indian communities and Indian designers and the supply chain that have challenged your norm, ways of thinking and your beliefs that were previously embedded in your business? And how has that changed or shifted what you do and how you do it?
Yeah, the interesting thing is with if you look at our business with India, it really started on the supply side. So my brother was been buying out of India probably since, I'd say, at least 2010, around that time. And the bulk of our drapery product that we bring into Australia comes from the Indian mills. So we take a huge lead from the Indian market. It's a massive influence in the product lines that we run as a global entity. Yeah, obviously not so much with what we sell in India, because what's the point in us selling Indian product back into India that's already made there, that's already been sold through channels, and there's no point, So, but it does have a huge influence on our product mix across our group. There's no doubt about that. It'll probably be about 25-30% of our product comes out of India. And we've just recently been very strong under our product Weave. So there's another sub-brand of ours called Weave, and there's a website, Weave Home, if anyone wants to have a look at that. and basically the rugs are all predominantly Indian rugs, you know. So my brother's just been over there on a buying trip to look at rugs, you know. So we
Bring the best of both.
oh yeah. So we do a lot of there's a lot of business both ways.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Anything else? Anyone else? Yes. Thank you. Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm here on behalf of Osback Finance. We currently work in mortgage broking. I'm not a Deakin alum yet, but I'm working on it. Yes, it's great. Good, I am. Yeah. But my question for you was actually, you've mentioned a lot about growth and how when opportunities, present themselves to you, you have to evolve and kind of grasp onto them. But as a business owner, I feel that most of them are playing on offense. You have to set something in motion in order to have those opportunities present themselves to you as well. So about that, what do you think? What's your framework when it comes to setting things in motion? How do you actually go after opportunities? What's your strategy?
Yeah, interesting. So if you look at the Asian market for us, we probably haven't had as much traction there as we have had in India or the Middle East. And it's interesting because I think we went into Asia first, and we were looking to create a distribution network in Asia to carry the Warwick brand through key distributors. And it's almost like you sort of throw the fish, as I said earlier, you throw this fishing net out there to see what you catch and where you get traction, And you might then pick on those 3 or 4 distribution channels that really, that you're getting traction through those channels, and that tells you that that's where you need to be and where you need to go, And it's a similar thing like with India, all of a sudden getting traction in India. Then we thought, well, okay, we're going to really start to invest into that market, right? So it can be a broader regional focus initially that then sort of pinpoints down, and then you work out the one that you know is worth investing and putting the time into. Yeah, that's sort of what we do. Like I'm working pretty hard on Dubai at the moment because I tend to focus now on the newer opportunities offshore with setting up structures offshore, and we've just recently set up an invoicing hub in Dubai. So we're invoicing locally in Dubai now, which is great. Because before our customers were having to clear the goods through themselves, etc. But now we're
That opens a whole new market for you.
yeah, exactly. So and we're wanting to do a similar thing there potentially, and put a warehouse in there and invest into the market there as well. And there's a lot happening in Dubai. It's just a huge amount of growth there as well with the property market, etc. And also Saudi and other countries in the Middle East are really starting to get some traction now, which is great. So you just progressively create the opportunity, open up something, do a bit of invoicing, dip your toe in the water, see if it works. Does it work? Yes, no, yes, does it put more into it? It's a bit like that. You just, building blocks.
I think what is really worth noting is that you can't always plan everything well in advance. You've got to also be organic. You've got to really think about the yes and the no's, the goods and the bads, and then you've got to have risk abilities in it. That's very important for businesses to be successful. Right? And I think that's a really good point that Leighton's been making, which is fantastic.
And you need the flair,
Yeah.
but you also need to have the judgment. So you need the flair to actually create the opportunity, but then you need the judgment to say to yourself, well, I only want to just put X amount to this to start with and not put everything into it, and just try it. You've got to have that a little bit of conservatism too, not to put all the money into it, just gradually build it up. Yeah.
It was interesting. So like you said, Deakin's opened a campus in India, and for me, it was more like sort of dipping our toe in the water and saying it is not a full-fledged campus, but it is a campus. And someone said to me the other day, said that you can't just dip your toe in the water in India. You've got to go full scale or you don't do it at all. And I was sitting there thinking that's probably not true, because I think any business that has to do well must know how it's going to get to that. whether it's setting up a university or it's setting up a business, you've got to get that strength behind you to make sure that your investment in the work that you're doing is in the right direction. And then, yes, there is a time when you make the decision to do more of it. I think that's what you say is really the understanding.
I agree with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, are there any questions? I'm quite interested. Yeah. Rishi.
Thank you. Rishi from Holy Sanity, and I'm a business owner myself, and everything you've said absolutely resonates in the journey that I'm on, and is very inspiring what you're saying. My question too is probably what you just touched on right at the end about flair and judgment. How do you manage business partners? In your sense, it sounds like it's family and brother, when there's a differing of opinion and it comes to decision making, because one might be thinking, no, this is what we want to do, and you might be really strong and this is what we want, like this is the direction we want to go. So how do you manage that?
Yeah. You need people in the business to act as a bit of a buffer on occasion, because what tends to happen, you can have a differences of opinion. But generally, my father and I have always agreed like-minded strategically, but yet then we've had different attributes that then work together. So we've been very lucky, very, very lucky. But then when you do have a juncture where there might be that point of contention, you've got to have some other people around you with a bit of grey hair or whatever it be, just to sort of say, well, hang on a minute, guys, have you thought about it this way? We approach it from another angle or whatever it be. So if it's just two of you and you butt heads, it's no good. You need to have
A buffer around.
You need to have
In business, or in your sense, is there a board or like who fits that?
Yeah, so it's really, we're very fortunate. There's an article in the Australian a few weeks back where my brother was photographed with Peter Vartel's Coles Meyer CEO, etc., and Foster's Group, and the worked with John Elliott and that generation, And Peter, we've been very fortunate that Peter is a bit of a mentor in our business over the years, and he's really been a great guide for my brother and I. And if we did have a situation where you'd have a point of contention or whatever it be, Peter would just sort of come from the flanks and say, well, what are you carrying on about? Why don't we just do this? So you need those sort of people. That's the key. You need that external guidance of someone with a bit of grey hair that's going to actually see it from another angle, Yeah.
All right. I think we sort of going to finish up with that question at the moment, and I'll pass on to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Ravneet, and good evening, everyone. My name's Sarah Banks, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Deakin University. And it's inspiring, really, to see so many of our partners, IABCA alumni, as well as our Deakin alumni here with us. I've really enjoyed this evening's conversation and partnering with IABCA on delivering this event this evening. And it does remind me of how collaboration and innovation really are the values that are at the heart of our Together campaign. And some of you may have heard just last week, we launched Together, which is Deakin's first ever fundraising and alumni engagement campaign. We have very bold and ambitious targets that are also generous in spirit, a mission to raise 150 million and to engage with 150,000 of our alumni by 2030. We've been working quietly towards these goals for a little while now, but it's engagement opportunities like this evening that will help us achieve these ambitious goals. Staying connected with Deakin means being part of a global network of curious, skilled and innovative professionals, people shaping their industries like Leighton and like many of you here this evening, sharing your knowledge and supporting each other at every stage. It's more than just keeping in touch, and it's about advancing your careers, your professions and your businesses as well, and building those meaningful connections, opening doors for the next generation as well. And it's a chance to be something bigger and to make the wonderful possible. Thank you so much to our wonderful partners at IABCA. Sonia, you do an enormous amount for our shared communities. And it's always a pleasure to partner with you and your team to bring these types of initiatives together. So thank you very much for your involvement.
Ravneet, your leadership and involvement has been instrumental in this partnership and also in bringing this evening together. So thank you. And as all of you know, Ravneet plays such an important role in Deakin's success in India. And it's through your leadership and innovation and drive that we've seen Deakin succeed for over 30 years now in India. And Leighton, thank you so much for making the time this evening to share your insights and learning with us. I know that our next contact with you should perhaps be about some accounting units. Get you back in for your masters, perhaps.
To try at one stage.
Yeah. Hearing more about your story, your successes and challenges will hopefully help inspire others within our community to be brave, to take those next steps, to pilot things in their own businesses or in their own careers, and in their career journeys. So thank you again for your involvement. We really appreciate your time. To our alumni and IABCA friends in the room and also online this evening, thank you for making the time to join this event. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to meet with many of you. And for those of you who are in the room, I do encourage you to continue to connect and network with one another and enjoy the hospitality and refreshments after this session. And finally, to the teams who have helped bring this event together tonight, a big thank you from all of us, especially to Tess and to Rishi, both from Deakin University and from IABCA. We really appreciate your support in making tonight possible. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.